In the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, there is a small clay pot sitting in a storage room. It is about the size of a human head. It has a narrow neck. It is completely unremarkable to look at. It was pulled from the wall of a cathedral during a renovation in 1968. The workers who found it assumed it was a mistake, some ancient vessel, accidentally sealed inside the masonry. They logged it, boxed it, forgot about it. In 2004, an acoustics researcher examining the catalog entry realized what it actually was. It was a speaker, not a modern one, not an electrical one. A precisely shaped resonating chamber, built into the wall of a 12th century building, designed to amplify a specific frequency of sound and dampen everything else. The cathedral it came from had hundreds of them. Every single one had been tuned. And the frequency they were all tuned to, the frequency that cathedral was built to amplify, no longer exists anywhere in the modern world. This is the story of how that happened, and why nobody noticed. Before 1711, no one on earth had ever held a tuning fork. That is not a metaphor. Tuning forks did not exist. There was no physical object you could strike and say, "This is the correct pitch. This is what a sound's like." So how did the world tune itself? Tuned to whatever was largest. In most of Europe, that meant the church organ. And church organs varied wildly. 2 churches in the same city could be tuned a full semitone apart. A musician traveling from one town to the next carried his instrument in one pitch and arrived somewhere else entirely. This was not a problem to be solved. It was simply the nature of sound. Every place had its own voice. The bells in your village rang at a frequency specific to your village. The organ matched the bells. The choir matched the organ. The stone walls amplified whatever frequency the builders had chosen. And the builders chose carefully because they understood something about stone and sound that we are only beginning to recover. We have physical proof of how much pitch varied across history. A tuning fork linked to the composer handle from 1740 vibrates at 422 Hz. A specimen from 1780, 409 Hz. Beethoven's personal fork around 1800, 455 Hz. That is a span of 46 Hz across 60 years. These were not provincial musicians in forgotten villages. These were the most prominent composers working at the center of European culture. And none of them agreed on what a sounded like. The idea that there was ever a single, natural or ancient frequency, one correct pitch that humanity discovered and then lost is not history. It is mythology. The truth is stranger and more interesting. Before we talk about what was destroyed, we have to talk about what was built. Because the bells did not exist in isolation. In 2016, researchers from Greek universities spent months inside 8 Byzantine churches in Thessaloniki with sine wave generators. They swept frequencies through the buildings and mapped exactly how each space responded to sound. What they found was not accidental. Embedded in the walls, inside the plaster, behind the frescoes were clay pots. Hundreds of them, placed in deliberate patterns, inside the masonry of churches that were 800 years old. These were not storage vessels. They were not decorations. They were tuned resonators. Acoustic technology built directly into the structure of the building. Each pot amplified specific frequencies and dampened others. The builders had, in effect, programmed the building to favor certain sounds. At Noyon Cathedral in France, researchers discovered an underground chamber beneath the crossing. A grid of acoustic vases arranged as a subterranean amplifier, designed according to principles described by the Roman architect Vitruvius in the 1st century BC. Medieval builders selected their stone deliberately. Limestone and crystalline rock conduct and amplify sound waves differently from wood or brick. Gothic cathedrals produce reverberation times of 5 to 8 seconds. Orthodox churches range from 1.5 to 6 seconds depending on size. One acoustic researcher, after spending years studying Orthodox church architecture, wrote something that I have not been able to stop thinking about since I first read it. He said these spaces were much better at holding sound than holding people. And he wondered whether the builders considered the sound itself, the resonance, the frequency, to be the true occupant. The painted saints on the walls, the reverberation of the bells, not the congregation. The building was not designed for the people standing inside it. It was designed for the sound. Now I need to give you a list. Not because lists are dramatic, but because the pattern only becomes visible when you see the numbers together. 1700. Tsar Peter the Great, following Russia's defeat at the Battle of Narva, ordered the confiscation of approximately 100,000 church bells across Russia. They were melted, cast into cannons. 1793. The French Revolutionary Convention passed a decree on July 23. Each parish could keep one bell. Every other bell in France was to be destroyed. In under 2 years, roughly 100,000 bells from 60,000 steeples were melted. 80% of all church bells in France, gone. 1870. During the Franco-Prussian War, the Bishop of Nancy authorized every parish in his diocese to surrender all but one bell. For canon production, diocese by diocese, the same pattern repeated across the continent. 1914 to 1918, the First World War. 44% of all bells in Germany were confiscated or destroyed. 1929. Decree 118, December 6. The Soviet government forbade all bell ringing. Every bell in the nation was ordered melted for industrial bronze. 99% of Russia's approximately 1 million bells were destroyed. 20 specialized bell foundries, families whose knowledge had passed from father to son across centuries, simply closed. When the Soviet Union collapsed decades later and foundries tried to revive the craft, they had to rediscover techniques from nothing. The knowledge was gone. 1939 to 1945. The Nazis confiscated more than 175,000 bells across occupied Europe. More than 150,000 were destroyed. Belgium lost 2/3 of its bells. British investigators reported that every single bell had been removed from the Netherlands. Only 300 survived, discovered in a warehouse in Hamburg. Added together, across 3 centuries, from different revolutions, different wars, different governments with completely different ideologies, at least 425,000 documented church bells were physically eliminated from Europe. Each one was a precision instrument. Each one had been tuned by specialists to a specific frequency. Each one served as the acoustic reference for its community. When the bells melted, the frequencies melted with them. While the bells were being destroyed, something else was happening. Governments began legislating sound. On February 16, 1859, the French government passed a law, not a guideline, not a recommendation, a law declaring that the note A above middle C would vibrate at 435 Hz across all of France. This was called the diapason normal. It was the first time in history that a sovereign state had dictated the pitch of music by legal statute. The law spread. An 1885 conference in Vienna adopted 435 across Italy, Austria, Hungary, Russia, Prussia, Saxony, Sweden, and Württemberg. Sound was being centralized. But 435 was not the end. In 1884, Giuseppe Verdi, the most celebrated opera composer of his generation, wrote to the Italian government. He supported the French standard, but added something remarkable. If the commission believed the pitch should be lowered to 432 for mathematical reasons, he would associate himself with that decision most willingly. Italy listened. The Italian War Ministry, not a conservatory, not a musicians' council, a military institution, formally adopted 432 Hz as the national standard. For 1 year, Italy tuned to 432. Then came a conference in Vienna in 1885. British delegates dominated. And without consulting Italian musicians, without a vote, without any apparent debate, they overruled it. Italy abandoned 432. The frequency that Verdi had endorsed was discarded within 12 months. The British simply decided it was over. In 1939, an international conference in London settled on 440 Hz. This has become the standard the entire modern world now uses. Every piano, every orchestra, every recording studio on the planet. I want to be careful here because this is where the story usually goes wrong. Some people will tell you that 432 Hz is a healing frequency, mathematically aligned with the universe, suppressed by governments who wanted to keep people anxious and compliant. Some people will tell you that 440 was imposed by Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels as a psychological weapon. I researched both claims. Neither holds up. The 1939 conference was organized by the British Standards Institute. 3 German delegates attended. None of them was Goebbels. The countries supposedly excluded were actually present. The conspiracy version of this story is seductive. It gives you a villain. It gives you a date. It gives you something to point at. But the actual history does not need a villain. What it has instead is a pattern. 3 completely different governments, 3 completely different centuries, 3 completely different ideologies, and the same result every single time. Old frequency references eliminated. New standards imposed from the center. You don't need a conspiracy to produce that outcome. You just need power, and the habit that comes with power of replacing the local with the universal, of standardizing what was once particular. A peer-reviewed study published in 2019 exposed 33 volunteers to music at both 432 and 440 Hz without telling them which was which. The 432 group showed measurable decreases in heart rate and reported higher feelings of focus and calm. 33 people is not a large sample. The study is not conclusive, but it is published. It is controlled. And it suggests that frequency is not arbitrary to the human body. If a single 8 Hz difference produces measurable physiological effects, then ask yourself, what did it mean to live inside a building, every day, for your entire life, where the bells, the organ, the choir, and the stone walls all resonated at the same frequency? Not just a frequency someone chose. A frequency the building was designed for. The buildings are still standing. You can walk into a Gothic cathedral today and feel it, that hum beneath awareness, that sense that the stone itself is alive with something you cannot name. Every tourist feels it. Every pilgrim describes it. We call it sacred. We call it awe. But the acoustic vases are still in the walls. The reverberation times are still measured by researchers. The limestone still favors the same wavelengths it was chosen for. The instrument is intact. Nobody is playing it. The real loss is not a number. It is not 432 versus 440. It is not one frequency against another. The real loss is the principle. Every village had its own sound. Every cathedral was an instrument tuned to its bells. Every bell was refined across generations by founders who understood the relationship between bronze and stone in ways we are still documenting. Standardization did not just change a pitch. It replaced an entire ecology of local sound with a single-tone broadcast from a radio tower. In 1936, the United States Bureau of Standards began transmitting a 440 Hz reference tone every hour from radio station WWV. Musicians across the country tuned to it. The local frequencies died. The national one replaced them. Then the global one replaced the national one. One pitch. Every instrument. Everywhere on Earth. The bells are gone. The founders who cast them are gone. The frequencies they carried melted with the bronze. And the question nobody is asking is not which number is correct. The question is, what was happening inside those buildings when everything was aligned? What did people experience in a space where the stone and the bronze and the human voice were all vibrating at the same frequency? A frequency that had been refined, not chosen, over 500 years of accumulated knowledge. We have the architecture. We have the acoustic technology embedded in 800-year-old walls. We have the reverberation data. What we do not have is the sound. And nobody alive today has ever heard it.